Good morning, and thank you for joining me today. I wanted to expand a little bit on my sermon from yesterday. I'm in a series about the Ten Commandments, and yesterday we got into the first commandment. We've already built a little foundation of going through a few things that are important to understand before we get to the Ten Commandments, but yesterday we got to the first one. And so I want to expand on that a little bit today as we continue through the series. But in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 3, here's what we read. Then God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. Do not have other gods besides me. And as we looked at that, of course, we talked about the setting that Israel found themselves in. When they received the Ten Commandments, they were in the wilderness, so it was a time between Egypt and the Promised Land. And both places were full of other gods. Egypt worshipped a lot of different gods and had idols that they would set up to worship them. The land of Canaan that they were moving toward, the Promised Land, the nations there had just a whole host of other gods that they worshipped. And so Israel literally had to struggle with that, and they were quite often tempted and fell to that temptation to trust in these other gods, maybe for prosperity or fertility or for good luck, lots of different things that they believed those gods would do for them. But God told them repeatedly, there is no other God that is worthy of worship and devotion the way I am. And he proved that to them by the way he cared for them. And we looked at how that matched what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6. And we saw that the focus of the intent of that first commandment, have no other gods before me, is really to change it from just don't simply put away the other gods, but focus on loving the one true Creator God. And Jesus said, make it your heart's desire to seek God above and beyond anything else in your life. And so we looked at that, but there's something else in that passage in Matthew 6 that really has stood out to me that I want to share this morning. That in verse 19, when Jesus started talking about possessions, I want you to see where that goes. In verse 19, he said, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves don't break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And that last verse really has caught my attention when Jesus said, wherever your treasure is, that is where your heart will be. And so as I have looked around the world, and I've seen, a growing trend as our modern world has more and more things to show that we really ought to have, particularly living in a big city that's got a lot of Western influence and, of course, a lot of prosperity showing and growing shopping malls. And so there is a lot more focus in many parts of the world today on having possessions. And of course, I think there's always been a focus on trying to have money and to gain wealth with whatever that might bring. And that becomes the God that people believe in, that they trust in, that they seek. Because as Jesus said, anything that becomes our heart's desire, that becomes our God. And, for my family, we have lived in Myanmar, we have lived in Thailand, we have traveled extensively in Southeast Asia and in a few other countries of Asia. And anywhere I have gone, whether it's Thailand, Myanmar, Nepal, Korea, anywhere that I have been, I have seen idols that people are setting up to worship and follow in many different ways. And as we go to different parts of the world and different cultures, we see different things that are the temptations for those people to make gods. But there is something that I have come to realize that is common to every culture because it is part of the human nature, that fallen human nature. And that one thing is something that we see, every one of us, every day. Anytime we look in the mirror, we see the temptation to follow another God, the temptation to follow self. And that, to me, I think really is one of the most dangerous temptations that we face, of making our own desires, making the things I want more important than God. And that's exactly what Jesus is talking about here, because he said, wherever your treasure is, that is where your heart's going to be. And so anything that I find more important than God literally becomes my God and causes me to fail in that very first commandment when God said, don't have any other gods besides me. And that's a scary thought because, I'm always with me. And my thoughts and my desires are always a battle, always a struggle. But God, in His amazing love to us, wants to help us to find true meaning in Him. And He has done so much for us to show His love, to show that He is worthy of being the only God that we should bow down and worship. When Jesus came, He showed ultimate love by dying on the cross in my place and in your place, and in coming back to life 3 days later to prove He can truly forgive our sin and give us eternal life. No other God has ever done that. No other God can do the things the one true Creator God has done. And so there really is no need to have any other God. But we do have to be careful every day of our life that we don't let our heart's desires lead us to find anything that is more important than God, because there is only one true God, and He is the only one worthy of worship and devotion. Thank you for being with me today.